Welcome back to CRYPTID'S Den. If today's felt a little heavy, I'm really glad you're here. Sometimes, all we need is a small space to breathe, to feel seen, and to not feel so alone. And that's what I hope this place can be for you. Let me know where you're watching from, if you feel like sharing. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your voice. Now, let's get into it. I didn't come to the desert to find anything. I came here to forget. After my divorce in 29, I left everything behind and moved into a rusty old trailer in the middle of the Arizona desert. No people, no noise, just silence. Or so I thought. Then the pebbles started, small stones tossed at my trailer every night. At first, I thought it was the wind. But it wasn't. It was a boy. Not just any boy. Not just any boy, a young Bigfoot, curious and playful. And behind him, his mother, a towering, silent figure I came to know as Cedar Woman. One night, I saw her chasing the boy through the sagebrush, moonlight pouring over her fur. I laughed quietly, and she turned to me, not with words, but with a voice that spoke straight into my mind. "You think you could do better?" That moment shattered everything I thought I knew. Cedar Woman never gave me lectures. She showed me through how she raised her child. With patience, with presence, with silence. She asked me, "Why do humans leave their children every morning?" I tried to explain school, work. But inside, I felt the ache of everything I hadn't taught my own son. Everything I'd missed. She took me to a sacred cave once, etched with stories of her kind, of betrayal, of survival and silence. I touched the stone and felt memories that weren't mine. I broke down. She didn't speak, just laid a hand on my shoulder. Then one day, she was gone. All that remained was a wildflower by a massive footprint in the sand. From a distance, the boy, now grown, stood still and bowed. I went back to my trailer, left 3 small pebbles lined up outside. My way of saying thank you. I never told anyone. Never wrote a book, just left a note at the end of a worn manuscript. If you ever see 3 stones lined up in the sand, don't be afraid. Someone might be teaching you how to love again, without saying a word. There's a kind of silence out in the Arizona desert that doesn't feel empty. It presses in around you like a slow breath. You think it's peace at first, solitude, but eventually, if you stay long enough, you start to feel like something's watching, not with malice, not even with curiosity, just watching. Like the land itself remembers you before you've even introduced yourself. I didn't come out here looking for answers, or closure, or healing. Hell, I wasn't even looking for quiet. I just wanted out. My name's Walt. I'm 43, divorced, no kids in my custody, no family left calling. Back then, I was just a tired man with a worn-out heart, towing a rusted-out trailer across the border of what used to be my life. I parked it on the outer rim of nowhere, just south of Bisbee, little patch of scrubland with no one on either side for miles. Coyotes, cactus, and sky. That was enough. For a while, I told myself I liked it that way. No alarms. No meetings. No reminders that I used to be someone people needed. But the desert's funny like that. It doesn't let you lie to yourself for long. Every evening, the sun would bleed out across the rocks, and I'd sit there on my busted aluminum steps, drink warm coffee from a chipped mug, and try not to remember anything that hurt. Then one morning, I woke up to 3 small stones on the back steps of my trailer. Perfectly lined up, side by side. Smooth, dusty, but intentional. Like fingers had placed them there one at a time. I stood there barefoot in the sand, just staring down at them. No footprints, no drag marks. Just 3 stones where no stones had been the night before. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's just rocks. Could have been the wind, maybe a critter. But I'd lived in that trailer a good 6 weeks by then, and nothing ever touched that rear porch. No animal came close, and the direction they were laid in, it was the side that faced straight out toward the empty desert. No trail, no fence, nothing. I didn't move them. Just walked around them all day like they were sleeping dogs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the heat, kind of heat that sticks to the inside of your chest and makes you feel like your body's forgotten how to breathe right. I opened all the windows, kicked off my sheets. At some point, I gave up and made coffee at 2 a.m. just to feel like I had some control over something. Then I heard it. Tink, a sound like a pebble hitting tin. I froze. Another one. Tink. Tink, tink. I stepped toward the back of the trailer, heart thudding, coffee sloshing over the rim of my mug. I flipped the floodlight on. Nothing. Just flat sand and moonlight. The kind of stillness that almost makes you dizzy. I waited 10 minutes, 20. No movement, no wind. Just the sound of my own breathing and the sharp burn of black coffee turning cold in my hand. I shut the light off, but I didn't sleep. Not that night. The next morning, the stones were gone. Not moved, gone. I told myself it was a fluke, a coincidence. I even laughed a little too loud, trying to chase off the unease. But I started locking the door, started looking over my shoulder when I stepped outside to piss, started noticing things I hadn't before. The way the birds went quiet for too long. The way my dog-eared paperback would fall off the shelf, for no reason. And then, a few nights later, it happened again, this time louder. The tapping came in a rhythm. 3 hard knocks on the back panel of the trailer, then silence. I jumped from bed, pulled on my boots, and ran out the door with a flashlight and an old baseball bat, swept the beam across the sand in wide arcs. Again, nothing. No footprints. No shadows. Just the hum of the desert and the sound of my own heartbeat pushing up into my throat. But the strange thing is, I didn't feel afraid. Not exactly. It was more like someone was checking on me, like a kid tossing pebbles at a window to see if someone's home. I went back inside and sat in the dark for a long time. Didn't even bother turning the light back on. Just sat there in the silence, holding that bat, trying to listen. That was the night I admitted something I hadn't said out loud in years. I said it to the empty room, to the night. I thought nobody gave a damn about me anymore. My voice sounded strange, dry, like it came from a part of me I hadn't used in a long time. But I don't think I've ever really been alone. Have I? There was no answer, of course. Not one I could hear, anyway. But the air shifted then, the way it does right before rain, when the clouds are too high to see but your skin knows they're coming. Something old and quiet moved through that room like breath. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I didn't fall asleep, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel empty either. The next morning, there were 3 stones on the steps again. New ones. Different shape. One was white quartz, smoothed by time. One was black, like basalt. The third looked almost metallic, like it had been burned in fire. Arranged the same way, lined up like tiny sentinels. I knelt down and touched the middle one. It was warm. I didn't move them, didn't sweep them away. I just sat down next to them, drank my coffee, and listened to the wind. The wind had a different sound that morning. Not music exactly, but not silence either. I've lived through enough birthdays to know when something's about to change. That morning, the sand shimmered a little longer. The clouds took their time rolling by. A hawk circled low over the ridge but never called out. It felt like someone was waiting on me. Not impatient, not demanding, just waiting. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about proof, or belief, or some campfire legend wrapped in fur and mystery. This was something older, quieter, like a hand reaching out through time not to be seen, but to remind me I hadn't been forgotten. Not everything has to shout to be heard. Sometimes it only needs to knock. And out here in the middle of the nowhere I chose for myself, something had found me anyway. Something that didn't need me to believe it, just to notice it was there. The night after the third set of stones, I sat out on the steps of the trailer. Just me, a tin mug of lukewarm instant coffee, and the kind of quiet you only get when the world's holding its breath. The desert didn't make a sound. Even the wind had gone still like it too, was waiting on me to say something. So I did. I leaned forward and whispered out loud, like I was talking to the sand itself. It felt silly, ridiculous even. But the moment the words left my mouth, I knew it wasn't. Something was listening. The next morning I walked out holding an apple. Just a regular old red delicious from the store in Douglas. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the thought that whatever, or whoever, had been leaving those stones might want something in return. Maybe it was just instinct, like leaving a gift for something older than rules. I set the apple down right on the edge of the back step. Didn't say a word. Just gave it the same quiet respect you give a grave or a prayer. By sunrise, it was gone. No bite marks, no half-eaten core. Just gone. In its place, in the exact same spot, was a little pile of grayish seeds. Kaya, I think, neatly arranged, like someone had poured them from cupped hands. That's when I knew, whatever I was dealing with, it wasn't random. This wasn't a coyote sniffing around or a raccoon playing tricks. Something out there understood the idea of give and take, trade. And more than that, it wanted to communicate, in its own way. That night, the tapping didn't come. But I didn't sleep either. I kept running it through my mind, the apple, the seeds, the stones. None of it felt threatening, but it didn't feel human either. Not quite. It was like a child trying to speak in symbols, like someone trying to connect without scaring me off. The next day, I dug through my junk drawer and found an old Zippo. The kind with a scratched-up eagle on the side hadn't worked in years. I cleaned it, gave it a shine, and left it where the apple had been, just to see. In the morning, the lighter was gone. In its place was a piece of bone, small, weathered. Looked like the end of a femur from a rabbit or something similar. But it had been carved. There was no mistaking that. A perfect little circle had been hollowed out right through the center. Smooth, like it had been worked over slowly, with care. Almost like a pendant. A gift. I held it in my hand for a long time. Felt the weight of it. The chill. The time. That little piece of bone held more silence than the desert itself. And I swear to you, it felt like it meant something. That was the first morning I didn't drink my coffee. I just sat there, staring out into the sand, waiting. Later that week I saw it. It was dusk, the light fading fast, and I was walking around the side of the trailer, fiddling with the generator when something moved near the brush. Not fast, not loud, just enough to catch the corner of my eye. I turned, and there it was, not fully. Not enough to draw a police sketch, just a silhouette, small, maybe 4 feet tall, covered in fur, but not matted like a wild animal. It moved with intention. A slight hunch to the shoulders, arms long hanging near the knees. I remembered the shape of its head, too round for a coyote, too upright for a bear. And the way it tilted, just a little, as if it were watching me watching it. Then, without a sound, it slipped behind a mesquite bush and was gone. I didn't chase it. Didn't even move. I just stood there, one hand still on the generator, and let the night swallow me whole. After that, things changed. Not in big ways. No howls in the night. No footprints in the dirt. But the air felt thicker, closer, like something had stepped forward, just a little from behind the curtain. I bought a trail camera, one of those motion-triggered kinds with night vision and timestamps. Mounted it to the rear awning, angled down toward the spot where I'd been leaving the gifts, just in case. The next morning, the camera was on the ground. Not smashed, just gently placed face down in the dirt. I picked it up, clean. No scratches. Almost like it had been set there with care. That night I checked the footage. It recorded. All of it. 8 hours of silent sand and shifting moonlight. Nothing out of the ordinary until the last 2 seconds. I froze when I saw it. 2 eyes. Wide. Round. Glowing pale in the infrared. Not like an animal's reflection. Not the green of a deer or the amber of a coyote. These were white, unblinking, and they looked straight into the lens. Not past it. Into it. Like they knew what it was. What I was doing. And for just 2 seconds they watched me. Then, nothing. The feed went black. I sat there, staring at that paused frame, the eyes caught in that glow, and I cried. I didn't even know why at first. It wasn't fear. Not really. It was something deeper, older. See, no one had looked at me like that in a long time, with attention, with awareness, like I mattered. Like I was more than just another broken man hiding in the desert. No one had given me anything in years. Not since my son stopped calling me Dad. And now, here I was, being traded with, watched, given gifts carved from bone. By what? I didn't know. I still don't. But it wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to speak. And for the first time in a long damn while, I was listening. I started leaving things every night. Buttons, coins, feathers I found on my walks. Each morning, something new would take their place. Bits of dried moss. A flat rock with strange scratches. Once, a tiny braid made of dry grass. That one sat in my hand like a secret, woven tight. Deliberate. Who teaches a creature to braid? Or who does it teach? The desert wasn't empty anymore. It hadn't been for a while. I just hadn't been still enough to notice. But now, every breeze felt like a whisper. Every shadow held a question, and I found myself answering. With my silence, with my offerings, with the kind of patience you don't get from books or prayer. The kind of patience that comes when you stop trying to prove anything to anyone and just exist with someone. Something. Not everything out there wants to hurt you. Some things just want to be heard. And sometimes, the deepest kind of love. The kind that doesn't have words, comes in the form of 3 pebbles, a hollowed-out bone, and a pair of eyes that never had to blink to see all the way through you. The wind's changed again. Something's closer now. And I think they're ready to show me something I've forgotten how to see. It happened on a Wednesday night, or maybe it was Thursday. Out here, the days blur together unless you're really paying attention. But I remember the moon, how it hung low and fat above the hills, washing everything in that silver-blue glow that makes even the ugliest things look holy. The air was cooler than usual, a whisper of wind curling through the creosote. I hadn't left anything out that day. No apples, no bones, no buttons or feathers. I just sat on the back steps, fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm chamomile, waiting for whatever was going to come next. And that's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was just the shadow of a saguaro swaying. But then it moved against the grain of the wind, shoulders swaying, not stiff, not rushed. Big, taller than any man I'd ever seen, broad shoulders, long arms, heavy steps that somehow made no sound. Her fur shimmered in the moonlight, reddish-brown, with streaks of darker earth tones running down her sides. She wasn't just big, she was solid, ancient, and yet she moved with a kind of care that didn't make sense for something that strong. She wasn't alone, trailing behind her, trying to match her stride but failing in that clumsy way only kids do, was a smaller figure, half her size, furry, grayish. Its movements were quick, playful, jumping from one rock to the next like it was part of a game. At one point, It tripped, rolled onto its side, and let out a squeaky yelp I felt more than heard. And she stopped. She turned around slowly, with a patience that hit me right in the chest. Waited for the little one to scramble up. No scolding, no panic, just presence. The kind that says, "I'm here, you're okay. Now let's keep moving." I should have stayed still, quiet. But I let out a breath. Too loud, too sudden. Not a laugh exactly, but something close. A short huff through my nose, like when you see something that reminds you of something you lost. And then I heard her speak, not with her mouth. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Low, female, steady, like a cello played underground. It wasn't a voice made of words, not in the way we speak them. But I understood her all the same. "You think you could have done better?" My chest tightened. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't mocking. It was curious, honest. She didn't look at me, not directly, but she knew I was there. And I knew she knew. That kind of knowing doesn't need confirmation, it just is. They moved on, vanishing behind the ridgeline, swallowed by shadows and moonlight. I sat there for a long time after they disappeared, not sure if I'd just seen something sacred or if I'd finally lost my grip on what was real. But deep down, I didn't care. Real or not, it made something stir in me that hadn't moved in years. The next night, I waited again. I didn't bring anything this time. No gifts, no camera, just me, in the dark, sitting with whatever it was I was supposed to feel. She came back, this time alone, no child with her. She stepped into the clearing slow and deliberate, keeping a respectful distance. 10 yards, maybe more. Her eyes caught the light. Amber, deep, like old honey. And she didn't look away. Neither did I. She stood there, arms relaxed at her sides, massive hands barely curled. Her fur shifted slightly in the wind, like tall grass swaying. There was sadness in her gaze. Not grief, not fear. Just understanding. A kind of tiredness I recognized too well. Like she'd seen too much and carried all of it without complaint. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Eventually I found myself whispering without meaning to. I didn't leave. I just didn't know how to stay. I didn't know why I said it. Maybe because I felt like she already knew. That I'd left things behind I shouldn't have. That I had chosen silence over apology. Distance over presence. My son, my ex-wife, my own damn self. She blinked once, slow and heavy. I saw something in that blink. Not forgiveness, not judgment. Recognition. That's when I realized what I was looking at wasn't some myth from the woods. Wasn't some feral creature ducking in and out of human sightlines. She was a mother. A tired, wild, ancient mother who didn't have to explain herself to anybody. She didn't come here for me. She didn't need saving. She didn't want help. She just wanted to show me something I'd forgotten. What it looks like when you love someone so deeply, you teach without talking. You protect without asking. You show up again and again. And I couldn't help it. I saw my reflection in her eyes. But not the version of me I showed the world. The version that hid in the desert, pretending peace was the same thing as absence. I saw the father I should have been. And maybe, just maybe, the man I still could be. She stepped back once, then again, never breaking eye contact. Then turned and walked into the dark, not vanishing, just choosing to leave me with the weight of what I had seen. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my little table, lights off, just watching the desert breathe through the window. And I thought about the way she stood, the way she looked at the little one when it fell, the way she looked at me. And I thought about how many times I'd yelled at my boy just for being loud, for being too much, for needing more than I had to give. I thought about how I used to leave the house early, before he was awake, and come back late enough that I wouldn't have to help with homework. How I told myself I was doing it for him, providing, being strong, being useful. But the truth was, I didn't know how to love someone out loud. I just knew how to survive. She reminded me there's a difference, out here in this quiet. Something wild had shown me the kind of presence I'd spent a lifetime running from. The kind that doesn't need to explain itself. The kind that just is. And even though I couldn't name what she was, I knew what she'd become. Not a ghost. Not a warning. Not a figment of my grief, but a lesson. Walking on 2 feet, wrapped in fur, lit by moonlight, and holding more truth in one stare than I'd ever said with 100 apologies. I don't know if she'll come back. I don't know if I'm supposed to follow her, but I do know this. The desert doesn't send messengers by mistake. It started with a question. Not one I asked. One I heard. Soft, slow, like breath pushing through branches. I was sitting at the picnic table beside the trailer, spooning peanut butter straight from the jar, watching the sunrise claw its way up over the low hills. That kind of morning where the sky's still figuring out if it wants to be blue or pink, and everything feels like it's holding back just a little. I hadn't seen her in almost a week, not since that night when she stared me down like she was peeling me open with her eyes. But she hadn't left, not really. The air still felt aware, like someone was always just behind the edge of what I could see. That morning, her voice came again, not out loud, not in any way you'd recognize. It was more like memory and thought and echo mixed into one. And what she said was simple, but it stuck. Why do your people send your children away each morning? That was it. I froze mid-spoonful, didn't even set it down. Just sat there, heart tapping against my ribs, like I'd heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. She didn't speak again, but the question lingered, hung in the air like smoke. Why do we send them away? It took me a while to realize what she was talking about. The school bus. From where my trailer sits, you can see the highway. But you can hear it if the wind's right, and most mornings, I'd catch the faint grind of brakes and the low rumble of a diesel engine slowing down at the corner, about 2 miles off. Sometimes I'd spot the yellow flash of it through the cactus. School bus, picking up kids from the edge of nowhere and hauling them to town. She'd noticed the pattern, the ritual. Parents letting go of small hands, doors closing, engines rolling off, and it bothered her. I tried answering her in my head, the way you do when there's no one to talk to, but someone might still be listening. I said things like education and socialization and better opportunities, all those words that sound good when you say them fast enough. But every one of them felt thin as tissue paper. She didn't respond. Later that evening, I saw her again, this time at a distance, maybe 30 yards out, up near the rocky ridge that caught the last light of the sun like it was made of glass. She wasn't alone. The small one was with her again, darting between her legs, tugging at her hand, trying to climb on her back. But she didn't push him away. She knelt down beside a patch of dry grass, brushed her fingers over a stone beetle I hadn't noticed, and pointed it out to him. He squatted, legs wobbling, and watched it with the kind of laser focus only kids have. She didn't explain anything, didn't give him names or facts. She just showed him how to watch, how to notice, how to learn without being told. They moved along like that for an hour, stopping at plants, bugs, old bones half buried in the sand. She never raised her voice, never grabbed his arm, never rushed, just kept walking slow, letting him discover. And I couldn't stop thinking about that question. Why do your people send your children away? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, flipping through old memories I thought I'd boxed up for good. Mornings in my old house, shoes untied, cereal on the floor, me barking at my son from the hallway to move faster. Hurry up! Let's go! I remember buckling him into the back seat without looking him in the eye, already thinking about traffic, about work, about bills. I remember dropping him off at that gray brick building with chain-link fences and double-pane glass and fluorescent lights that always buzzed too loud. I remember waving once, just once, before pulling off. I don't remember what he was wearing, but I do remember this. Every time I drove away, something in me felt hollow. Like I was outsourcing something I was supposed to be part of. Like I was handing him over to strangers and hoping they'd do a better job than I could. And for a while, I told myself they did, that they knew better, that I didn't have it in me, that I was doing what everyone else did. But now, I was watching a mother who'd never read a book in her life teach her child more in 1 hour than I had in years. No whiteboard, no bells, just presence, and love so quiet it didn't need a name. The next day, I tried answering her again. I sat on the porch, the air still as glass, and said, "We send them away because we're scared we'll mess them up if we don't. Because the world's faster than we are now. Because we forgot how to teach." There was no reply, just the sound of wind through the Palo Verde. Dry leaves ticking against the siding of the trailer. The sky above me stretching wider than I'd ever seen it. That evening she came closer, closer than she'd ever dared before. She stood maybe 10 feet from me, not looming, not crouching, just standing there like a question carved into the shape of a mother. And she spoke again. "You give them to others to teach. We would never let someone teach our young who did not love them." I didn't know what to say, because she was right. Not every teacher loves the kids in their care. Some do, some try. But a system built for efficiency forgets to make space for love, for slowness, for mistakes. And we call it progress because it keeps moving. She raised her arm, slow, deliberate, and pointed toward the ridge behind her. The little one was there, balancing on a flat boulder, trying to stack pebbles the way I'd once done without knowing he was watching. She lowered her hand, and I lowered my eyes. Not out of shame, not entirely, but out of understanding of what I had missed, what I had traded. I thought being a father meant protecting someone, providing, keeping them clothed and fed and quiet and out of the way when life got hard. I never realized it also meant being there, not just in the room, but in the ye momenti, showing them how to notice, how to breathe, how to stand still and just see the world. By the time I looked up again, she was gone. But her voice stayed with me long after the stars came out. And so did her question, the kind that doesn't have a clean answer. The kind that waits in the dark with you, demanding not that you explain, but that you will remember. It wasn't the kind of place you just found. She had to show it to me. The day started quiet, hotter than usual. The kind of heat that doesn't rise. It settles, low in your lungs, in your knees. The desert gets heavy in late afternoon, and that day, everything felt dense, like the sand had soaked up too many stories and didn't know how to hold them anymore. I had just finished rinsing out the coffee tin I used for boiling water when I noticed her at the edge of the arroyo, standing still. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking anywhere, really. Her shoulders were squared toward the distant ridge, her back to me, and there was something in her stillness that pulled at my bones. Not urgency, not warning. Just a quiet, ancient request. Come. So I followed. We didn't speak. I didn't try. She didn't look back once. Her steps were wide, long, soundless. Mine were clumsy. I kept tripping over little stones and spiny plants I couldn't name. The land got unfamiliar fast. I realized I'd never gone this far from the trailer on foot. I'd always kept to the same routes, loops of safety carved into my days. But this path was older than my fear, older than my loneliness. She knew it by heart. It took maybe an hour, could have been longer. The sun dipped low enough to paint everything in rust and gold. Then she stopped. Her hand rose, not fast, not abrupt, and pointed to the side of a stone bluff that jutted out like the broken tooth of some buried giant. I wouldn't have seen it if she hadn't shown me. A crack in the rock, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways, almost hidden behind an old Palo Verde, the bark split and peeling like burnt paper. She ducked in without hesitation. I paused at the entrance, swallowed down the tightness in my chest, and followed. The light changed instantly. Everything went quiet. The air felt thick, not with heat, but memory. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring like they're trying to fill the space with something. And then I saw it. The cave opened up wide and round, like a cathedral made of stone and breath. The walls were marked with swirls. Hundreds of carved deep into the rock with something hard and deliberate. Some were tiny, no bigger than a coin. Others spanned across the entire surface, overlapping like waves or fingerprints. At first glance, they looked random, but the longer I stared, the more they formed patterns. Stories. It wasn't art. It was memory. She moved to the center of the chamber, knelt, and placed her palm flat against a jagged boulder that stood like an altar. Without thinking, I did the same. The moment my skin touched stone, something hit me. Not pain, not sound. A feeling, like falling through someone else's life. I saw firelight dancing across fur. I heard the cries of children, not frightened, but wild and joyful. I smelled cedar smoke and blood and the sharp tang of river water. I saw men, our kind, approaching with torches. I saw fear ripple through a forest that had never known fear. I saw betrayal. I saw chase. I saw fire again, but this time not in joy. In rage, I pulled back, gasping. She didn't flinch. Her hand remained steady. Her head bowed low. That same ancient stillness wrapped around her like a shawl of mourning. I looked back at the walls. This wasn't a secret. It was a scar. And we had left it. She turned to me then, met my eyes, and for the first time I felt her speak, not into my thoughts, but into my grief. We don't need to be seen. We need to be remembered. It cracked something in me. I'd spent so long trying to disappear, trying not to be a burden, trying not to take up space. I thought solitude was peace, that vanishing was healing, but she'd carried her people's pain like a prayer, not hiding it, not escaping it, just keeping it safe, honoring it. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe in years. They didn't hate us. They mourned us, not the version of us that hunts and burns and forgets, but the ones who once sat in silence beside them, who learned from them, who traded stones and songs and stories. Somewhere along the way, we stopped remembering, and they didn't know how to forgive that. When we left the cave, the world felt different. The sun had dipped below the ridge. Everything was bathed in that deep blue light that only lasts for 5 or 6 minutes before the stars take over. The kind of light that softens even the hardest things. She didn't wait for me to speak. She walked back the way we came, this time a little slower. The little one had joined her again, bounding over dry roots and slipping behind her legs like he was practicing shadow. Halfway back, I stopped walking. She didn't turn. I whispered, "I'm sorry." She paused. "I'm sorry," she paused. For a moment, I thought she might keep going, that it wasn't her place to accept that kind of apology, that I hadn't earned the right to offer it. But then she nodded, just once, and it broke me. That night, I sat in the dirt outside the trailer. No fire, no lights, just me and the memory of stone. I watched the stars rise, one by one. I didn't sleep. I thought about my son, about the stories I never told him, the ones I didn't think mattered, about how he used to ask me questions I didn't have the patience to answer, about how he wanted to learn from me, and I gave him homework instead. There are things in this world that live without asking to be noticed. They don't want glory, or proof, or headlines. They want to be remembered, because being remembered means we understood what we saw, and that we carried it forward. Now, When I look out at the desert, I don't see emptiness anymore. I see memory, and it's waiting for someone to carry it, gently, with both hands. There's a kind of silence out here that doesn't feel like peace, not the soft, thoughtful quiet you grow to love in the desert. This one's different. It arrives without warning, settles too deep, too heavy. The birds don't sing. The wind doesn't stir. Even the bugs, those tiny engines of noise that buzz through every crevice of this land, they vanish. I woke up into that silence. At first, I didn't notice. I brewed coffee, like I always did, sat on the steps with the mug steaming against the cool morning air. I waited for the breeze that usually came through around sunrise. Waited for the sound of cactus wrens flitting across the roof. Waited for the soft rustle of mesquite brushing against the siding. Nothing came. It felt like the desert had stopped breathing. That's when I noticed the emptiness. Not just around me. In me. I stood, set the mug down, and walked out past the trailer. Past the patch of bare earth where the 3 stones used to appear. I kept walking, barefoot, over hard-packed sand, until I reached the dry wash that curved like a scar behind the ridge. And there it was, a single marigold blooming in the sand. Orange petals curled outward like a tiny sun rising out of nowhere. It made no sense. There were no other flowers for miles. Nothing should grown there. But the bloom stood proud, untouched, defiant in the middle of all that silence. Beside it, half in shadow, half in light, was a footprint, huge, longer than my forearm, pressed deep into the earth as if someone had stood there a long while, watching, waiting, remembering. My throat tightened. I knew. I didn't need proof or logic or some vision in the dark. I didn't need to hear her voice again to understand what this meant. She was gone. I dropped to one knee without even thinking, reached out. But I didn't touch the flower. I just let my hand hover, trembling above it, as if my fingers might ruin something too sacred for skin. Behind me, a shadow moved. I turned. He was there, not a child anymore. Taller now. Shoulders broad, arms hanging loose at his sides, legs longer than they had any right to be. The same grayish fur, but denser, darker. Eyes the same as hers. Amber, steady, silent. He didn't come closer. Just stood there, still as the earth, staring at me with something I couldn't name. Grief, maybe, or resolve, or both. I didn't speak. Neither did he. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of things we couldn't say, things we didn't need to. He gave a small nod. Not a goodbye, not quite. Just acknowledgement, recognition. A thread passing hands, and then he turned, slow and steady, and walked back into the dust. His figure faded between the yuccas and mesquites, until the land swallowed him whole. The breeze returned a moment later, soft at first, then stronger. The wind picked up a handful of grit and flung it across the rocks. A cactus wren chattered in the distance. A lizard scurried over a sun-warmed slab. The desert was breathing again. But something had changed. Something inside me had gone quiet in a new way. That night I sat alone under the stars, didn't light a fire, didn't bring out a drink. Just sat in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the world settle into its nighttime rhythm. Owls, coyotes, wind through brittle grass. I thought about funerals, how we wear suits, and say the same polite lies. How we call it closure. As if death ever really closes anything. But out here, there were no flowers on a coffin. No photographs framed in black. No hymns. Just a single bloom in the sand. One giant footprint beside it. And a boy who had become a man too soon. And somehow, it felt truer than any burial I'd ever been to. because it wasn't about grief. It was about presence. She didn't need a ceremony. She didn't need words. All she needed was for someone, just one person, to notice that the wind had stopped, that the birds had gone quiet, that something sacred had passed through this world and left a mark behind. And maybe that's what I'd become. Not a friend, not a witness, but a keeper. Someone to remember the silence properly. I thought about all the ways I used to imagine dying. Alone, in bed, with no one left to call, or maybe in the desert, dehydrated and stubborn, too far gone to walk back. But I never imagined living. Not like this. Not feeling tethered to something I didn't understand but trusted. Not learning from something that didn't speak in words but in echoes. I used to think I was the loneliest man in the desert. Turns out she was. She'd carried her whole people's story on her shoulders. And now, somehow, it had landed in my hands, not to tell. Not to explain. Just to hold, gently. And to never, ever forget. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't cry either, because she was never really gone. She was in the way the owls paused on the power lines now, scanning the dark with wider eyes. She was in the path the wind took as it curled around the trailer and pulled my screen door open just an inch. She was in the silence that didn't ache anymore, only hummed. And maybe, just maybe, she was in me too. 3 stone. That's how it started. And that's how I chose to say goodbye. I remember the morning I placed them. Flat, dry, still cold from the night. One smooth white, one dark and coarse like lava rock. And the last, a little reddish chip I found near the ridge where the lizards sun themselves. I laid them out in a line, just like before. Not to summon anything, not to provoke, but as a kind of handshake, a closing gesture. The way you might leave a note under a door you know will never open again. There was nothing fancy about it. No wind shift. No glowing light, no sound from the hills. But my hand trembled as I let go of the last stone, because I knew what I was doing. I wasn't trying to bring her back. I was promising I'd carry her forward. After that, I didn't go looking anymore. I didn't stand at the edge of the wash or wait by the Palo Verde. I stayed inside for the first few days, moved slower, quieter. The world hadn't changed. The desert still lit up gold every evening. The jackrabbits still darted between the creosote. But inside, something had shifted. Not broken, just stilled. I started writing. Not on a laptop. I didn't even have one anymore. Just a stack of lined yellow paper I kept under the kitchen drawer, and a box of pencils I hadn't touched in years. I wrote the story out longhand, not like a report, not for proof, just to feel it again. Like a trail of breadcrumbs I was leaving in case someone ever found themselves walking the same path. Maybe they wouldn't see what I saw. Maybe they wouldn't believe a word. That was fine. I wasn't writing it to convince anyone. I was writing to remember. I didn't include names, not of places, not of people. What mattered wasn't location. What mattered was presence, stillness, the way a mother stands between her child and the world without needing to explain why. The way something ancient and wordless can reach into your chest and remind you who you really are. I finished the whole thing in a week, stacked the pages neatly, tied them together with a strip of old cloth I cut from the flannel I used to wear during cold desert nights. On the cover I didn't put a title, just one sentence, written in the same shaky pencil. If you ever find 3 stones laid in a row, smile. You're being taught something. And silence is the teacher. I didn't hide it. I left it out on the table, right next to the coffee tin, where the morning light always hit best. Maybe no one would ever find it. Maybe it would blow away in a storm. That didn't matter either. The act of writing it had been enough. It had burned it into me. One afternoon, a pickup truck rolled down the dirt path to deliver supplies. Young guy. Didn't ask questions, just handed over the box and nodded. As he turned to leave, he paused and said, "You the guy who lives out here alone?" I nodded. He squinted out toward the horizon and said, Ever get lonely? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Not anymore." He left without saying another word, but I caught him glancing at the 3 stones as he passed the trailer. He didn't ask. He didn't touch them. Just looked. That was enough. Some days, I still catch myself watching the ridgeline at dusk, out of habit, not hope. I don't expect to see her anymore. But the quiet she left behind has a shape now, a rhythm. I don't fight it. I don't try to fill it with sound. I just let it move through me like wind through dry grass. I think that's what she wanted all along. Not worship, not fear, just memory. And maybe that's what this story really is. Not a mystery, not a warning, but a legacy handed off in pieces. A set of eyes that watched me when I didn't even know I was being seen. A kind of wordless trust, passed between 2 creatures too tired to explain themselves. I kept the bone pendant, the one shaped into a circle, given to me in exchange for a broken lighter. I tied it to a string and hung it above the window where the sun comes in. It turns slowly when the breeze picks up, casting a little shadow on the counter. Every time I see it move, I nod, not to her, to what she gave me. I think about my son now and then, haven't spoken in a few years. I don't expect him to call, but if he ever does, if somehow, by some miracle, he ends up out here looking for me, I'll give him the pages. Let him read them without questions, without apology. Let him see what I saw. And if he asks me what it all means, I'll tell him nothing and everything all at once. Because sometimes a story isn't meant to answer anything. Sometimes it's just meant to sit beside you, quieted as a shadow, and remind you that you were never invisible, never forgotten, just waiting to be seen. And if you ever see 3 stones lined up in the dust, stop. Not because they're met, but because someone once left them for you, so you'd know where to start. Montana winters have a different kind of quiet. Not the stretched-out stillness of the desert I used to know, but something tighter, like the sky is holding its breath. The cold doesn't just touch your skin. It moves in, lives in your bones, lives in your memory. I came up here after everything. After the writing, after the stones, after I stopped waiting for her shadow to return. I didn't leave the desert because I was finished with it. You don't finish with something like that. I left because it had already given me what it came to give. And I had to carry that someplace else. Somewhere the wind still speaks, just in a different tongue. Now I live in a small cabin tucked along the tree line near the edge of glacier country. Still remote. Still off-grid, but greener. Softer. The kind of land that holds you even when you're not sure you deserve it. I keep a stove burning through most nights. My hands shake sometimes when I chop wood, but I don't mind. The fire reminds me I'm still here. I started writing letters again, not the kind you send. Not with stamps or envelopes, just the little thing, scraps. Notes to no one in particular. Sometimes to the boy I used to be. Sometimes to the woman who changed the way I saw the world. Sometimes to the people I'll never meet, who might someday sit in the same kind of silence and wonder if they've been forgotten. I keep them in a tin box by the window. One of them's written to you, or someone like you. Someone who wandered into this story not looking for proof or thrill or even belief, but something quieter. Something honest. Maybe you felt it too. That flicker just behind the ribs. That sense that something out there knows your name and chooses to remain unseen. Not because it doesn't want to be known, but because it's waiting for you to know yourself first. See, I never meant for this to be a story. Not the kind you sell. Not the kind you share at dinner tables or pitch to publishers. This was always a memory. Not just mine. Ours. It belongs to the hush between footfalls, to the warmth of a sunbeam falling on old wood, to the gap between heartbeats where you realize someone, or something, was there all along, and you just didn't know how to listen. If I could tell you one thing, it wouldn't be what I saw. It would be what I learned when I stopped trying to see. That sometimes what's most important won't call your name. It'll wait, patient as a mountain, quiet as dusk, until you're still enough to feel it press back. I used to think stories like this were for the broken. Now I think they're for the listening. There's a rhythm in nature, a kind of breath. Things show up when they're meant to and leave the same way. You can't rush it. You can't demand a sign. But if you've ever woken in the night and felt like something was just outside, not threatening but watching, then maybe you already know what I mean. If you've ever looked at a stretch of woods or a patch of frozen field and felt suddenly small and somehow held at the same time, you've felt it. If you've ever sat alone and not felt alone at all, then you've been closer to them than most ever get. Not because they let you see, but because you remembered how to notice. These days, I don't go out much. I tend the stove. I watch the snow gather in soft drifts across the porch. I feed the crows when they come near. I still talk to her sometimes, not expecting a reply. Just saying thanks for choosing me, for not needing me to be perfect, for showing up when I thought the only thing left in this world was silence and shame, and for leaving me with something I'll never be able to explain, but will carry until my last breath. If you made it this far, reading, listening, sitting with me in this old winter air, then maybe this story wasn't meant for me to keep. Maybe it was always yours. I'm not asking you to believe it. I just hope you remember what it made you feel. And if one day, somewhere deep in a canyon, or at the edge of a frozen lake, or beside a trail no longer marked, you find 3 small stones laid side by side in the dust, don't be afraid. Don't overthink. Just smile. You're not being hunted. You're not being tested. You're being reminded that you were seen, that someone somewhere noticed, and they left you a moment of their silence so that you could remember yours. There are stories we tell to pass the time, and then there are stories that stay with us quietly, long after the last word is spoken. Not because they shocked us, not because they dazzled us, but because they reminded us of something we already knew, and maybe forgot how to feel. This was never just a story about the unknown. It wasn't about answers. It wasn't even about what's real and what's not. It was about presence, stillness, connection, about the way the world speaks when we finally get quiet enough to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful truths aren't shouted from mountaintops. They arrive in small moments, a breeze through the trees, a shadow that doesn't feel threatening, a pattern of stones left behind not to scare, but to say, G was here, and so were you. The deepest connections don't always come from words. Sometimes they come from silence, from the trust that grows between 2 beings who have no shared language, only shared feeling. A glance, a gesture, a pause. And in those spaces between explanation and understanding, something unshakable is born. We spend so much of our lives looking outward, chasing meaning, chasing validation, chasing the next thing that will prove we're not alone. But once in a while, if we're lucky, the world slows down just enough to place something in front of us, something ancient, something gentle, something true. And it doesn't ask us to believe it. It simply asks us to notice it, to remember that we are not separate from nature. We are part of it, and just like the quietest creatures, we too need to be seen. Not with spectacle, but with care. In the end, what matters most isn't whether we saw something extraordinary, but whether it changed the way we see everything else. If this story stirred something in you, if it lingered, even just a little, then let it. Let it walk with you a while. Let it reshape the way you notice the wind, the trees, the small signs that someone, somewhere, might be walking beside you without needing to be seen. Thank you for spending your time here, for listening with an open heart, for honoring the silence between the words. If you felt something, I'd love to know. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or just sit with the stillness a little longer. And if stories like this speak to you, I hope you'll consider subscribing and following along, because there's always more to listen to, just beneath the surface of what we think we know. Until next time, take care of your quiet. It's speaking more than you realize.